Welcome, everybody, to the new episode of RockerMike and Rob Presents. I'm RockerMike. We got Rob Rossi, top right. How are you, Rob?
Pretty good.
Good, good. And we have returning guest. I think this is the third time he's been on in recent months. Author Richard Balls. Last year, we had given him the award at the end of the year for the must-read book of the year that he wrote about Shane MacGowan. This
Excellent
time,
book.
we're going to be talking about a different book. It's a book he wrote a few years back on the record label Stiff Records. It's called Be Stiff, the Stiff Records Story. Welcome back, Richard. How you doing?
Yeah, great to be back. Yeah, thanks for having me again.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
You're like part of the family now. It's
Yeah.
great.
That's how I feel. Part of the furniture.
And this is the way the book looks. This is the cover,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. This book, I read it when it came out. Trying to remember now. Was it like 2019, something like
I think
that?
it was 20. It was about 2014. The
2014.
original,
Yeah, it was that long
the
ago.
original edition. Yeah, so quite a while ago.
And I'm a tremendous fan of the Stiff Records catalog. I mean, just so people have an idea.
Were they the Damned? The Damned ones?
Yeah, the Damned were on there.
I love the Damned.
The Adverts, Elvis Costello,
Yeah.
Ian Dury and the Blockheads, Graham Parker, the Pogues, the Dubliners, Tracy Ullman, and Motorhead even. And I mean, like, just an incredible catalog of artists that, you know, went on to some huge things afterwards.
Yeah, it's a hell of a lineup.
Amazing. Yeah. It was a very eclectic lineup. You had a lot of American acts on Stiff as well.
Right.
You know, and they played quite an important role. Some of them. So there's a lot of your guys.
One of them was the Undead, and and we're friends with Bobby Steele and stuff like that. I think he might have released a single or something. I'm not sure. But originally the label was put together by two gentlemen, Jake Riviera and Dave Robinson. And these guys were well known because they had worked with everybody from Jimi Hendrix to Brinsley Schwartz, which was Nick Lowe's early band. Yeah. And they decided to put this together in what year was it? Did it start? About
76,
76, right? And they brought on Nick Lowe. He's a very integral part of the beginning of the history. So why don't you just give us a little history of the start of this label and tell us how that happened?
Well, 1975, 76 was a very strange kind of time in music in the UK. Certainly in terms of the charts. If you look at the amazing music in the early 70s, Bowie, then going for glam, Roxy Music, so many exciting acts, lots and lots of amazing folk acts. But by the time you got to 75, 76, the Top of the Pops, which was effectively the only real vehicle in terms of getting yourself out there as an artist or a band. Top of the Pops was like part of the BBC's light entertainment offer. It wasn't really so much about what was happening in pubs and clubs and venues and what was happening maybe in the music press and what they were writing about. It had gone down a path of middle of the road, Manhattan Transfer and the Dooleys and lots of novelty records. It was pretty much kind of year zero really, I think, in terms of the charts. So Dave Robinson and Jake Riviera had their background in pub rock. And they were watching amazing acts. I mean, albeit in very small, often quite grotty venues and back rooms of pubs. A lot of them were in London. Some were a bit further afield. Primarily, it was in kind of London.
Right.
But what they were really frustrated about was the quality of the songwriting, particularly of some of those people that they were sort of seeing, like Graham Parker, Nick Lowe, who you've mentioned. Ian Dury was in Kilburn and the High Roads at that point.
How about Devo? Devo came from Stiff also, right? Didn't Devo also come from Stiff?
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah, I mean they came along later, so there was a lot of American influence, and actually it was so they were kind of frustrated, and they couldn't understand why people who were as good as songwriters as say Graham Parker and Nick Lowe were just not getting anywhere. And by '76, Brinsley Schwartz had split up, Kilburn and the High Roads had kind of finished. So there was a lot. They were kind of doing a bit of management with Graham Parker, but there really was. It felt like a lot of these people were never going to get on. They were never going to move on beyond the walls of the pubs that they were playing in. The majors, a lot of the majors had passed on some of these acts and others, so they were kind of frustrated. And Riviera was actually over in the States, I think in '75, and he was touring with Dr. Feelgood. And while he was in the States, he looked at what was happening with labels like Berserkly, and he was quite impressed, I think, by the fact that you had a lot of these kind of smaller indie labels. Berserkly, I think he liked the whole feel of the way it promoted itself. Home of the hits, I think. Berserkly.
They were out of California, okay,
Yeah,
and they were kind of they were an indie label in a sense, with a good distribution. That I think that's what helped them Berserkly get some of that music out there.
Yeah. So when Stiff began, it didn't have a distribution network at that. Not for the first few records.
Right.
But I think Jake came back to this country, having been in the States, really impressed by what he saw. Records like Roadrunner, he kind of saw that's the kind of music that we want to get to. To British ears, this is the kind of stuff that we want to, raw, kind of exciting. If it can be got to people, they'll love it, and they'll have the same kind of reaction that the people who were standing in these kind of like sticky floored pubs were having, and just being absolutely blown away by this music. Because I think obviously prog as well had and that a lot of that sort of album, because it was very much an album culture in the '70s. Audiences had, live audiences had sort of got further and further, literally, physically further away from the stage. And Robinson and Riviera would love the fact that when you went to these pub gigs, you were standing, literally feet away from the people who were performing. So I think they just wanted to get it back to, focus on the audiences, and also the product. They were excited about the idea of giving customers, giving buyers something really exciting to buy.
Yeah, and I'll just say too, on both sides of the pond, the music scene was not that good in 1975. Okay, it really was kind of, you went from a period of the late '60s, a lot of hard rock, into the early '70s. What was coming out of England, Bowie and stuff like that was great, but even Bowie changed by '75.
Yeah.
And, he was doing his Young American stuff, which ironically, I was reading about yesterday that it's actually 50 years that came out. That's hard to believe.
Wow.
Oh my God.
Yeah, but
frightening.
What you're talking about is really an underground kind of music, and Stiff Records really wanted to put that out there. So many bands were going the concept album route as opposed to like being concerned with playing live. Okay. Yeah. There was a lot of bands that, they played live, but that wasn't their emphasis. It was really like just putting out these like long concept records and things like that. And it was kind of like a back to the basics kind of thing that needed to happen. And of course, punk would come out of that very soon. It didn't take long. Okay. No. But this little period at the beginning of Stiff is interesting because it really was underground. Now, what was the first single to come out on Stiff?
Nick Lowe, So It Goes.
So It Goes, right.
Oh, Nick Lowe.
Great tune. And the B-side was Heart of the City.
Yeah.
Okay.
Brilliant record, which was knocked up in classic sort of, this is the way that Stiff did everything. And it was very much that DIY ethos that like you say with punk. It was done at Pathway Studios, which was like a sort of broom cupboard, like a tiny little place. was actually set up with the money from the royalties for Fire by Crazy World of Arthur Brown.
Oh, wow.
With the money that they made from that, they set up a little studio there, and Robinson needed somewhere to go. So Pathway, which is in Islington in North London, they chose that, and it was very much done on a. I think you could literally rent it for like £8 an hour.
Wow.
And I think So It Goes was probably recorded and finished in like 3 hours or something. So they just Low would just went in. They got some guy from the Rumour on the drums, and that was it. They just knocked it out. Brilliant record. So exciting.
Yeah, and it sold 10,000 copies initially, which was pretty good.
That's good.
Now, I've always been. I don't remember if I read it in the book or I've heard, but wasn't there a like we were saying, a distribution issue? Like it could have actually been a bigger hit.
I think definitely at the beginning it was like mail order.
Yeah, the only way to get it. Yeah.
So that's the only way you could get that record. I think was pretty much by mail order. They didn't have any distribution deal with like Rough Trade or anyone else at that time.
How did you do that back in the days? Mail order, like that must have been difficult to sell 10,000 record. I mean, you really had to look out for it, man. Probably in a magazine or something.
Yeah, they'd probably be advertised in the music press and stuff like that, and then you'd have to send off. I know it sounds like now that no young music fan would go to the effort of sending away. You'd have to have like a special check to send off. Right. And then it would have to be posted out to you and so on. It just feels like an incredibly elaborate process. But a lot of things were bought that way.
Wow, that was the only way to do it. If you were into music and you wanted to hear this up and coming stuff, that was the only way to do it.
And although Stiff, a lot of the early records on Stiff weren't hits, so they didn't make money that way. But obviously, mail order was a better way because you were cutting out any wholesalers and retail, so Stiff would have made more from that in that way.
Understood. Yeah, it makes sense. So they would have a lot of success with So It Goes. The Pink Fairies were another early band that they were involved in. Great, very cool band. Track called Between the Lines, I think, was a single, right?
Yeah, that was the second one. They Stiff rather cleverly, right from right at the beginning, they decided that the records would be catalogued as BUY
by
one,
by
two,
one,
by one, by two, by three, and actually it was a nice little way of almost saying you want to collect these.
Yeah, like keeping track of it. Yeah.
Yeah,
that's cool. That's cool. But then on October 22nd, 1976, one of the most important singles of the 70s ever came out, as far as I'm concerned, and that's The Damned. Okay, one of the first punk band to ever release anything in England. Okay, and they released the single of New Rose, the song New Rose.
New Rose. I mean, it's interesting how some music kind of dates when you hear it and you listen back. Yeah. And it's not quite as exciting as when you first heard it, but actually with things like Roadrunner, but also New Rose, you listen to that anytime, in the future. That is timeless. It's timeless. It's so exciting.
It's timeless. You know why? Because that's the kind of song you can release right now, and it'll be like nobody will even wink an eye. They'll be like, "Wow, this is great."
So distinctive. You got that spoken line. Is she really going out with him?
The beginning.
And then, and then you get these kind of like amazing sort of avalanche of drums, Rat Scabies drums, and then the whole thing gets going, and it's just electrifying, brilliant record. And it's very sad to see that Brian James has just passed away this week.
Yeah, sad.
Who wrote that?
Yeah, yeah. I didn't know he was sick. Was he sick?
I didn't know. I interviewed him for this book. I interviewed him in a pub down in Brighton for this book, and had a really good session. Chatting with him. I wasn't aware that he was ill. He was 70.
That's not old.
No.
We'll all go. Hopefully, we all get it.
Yeah.
I mean, I heard that the other day.
He wrote some brilliant stuff.
I heard that.
New Rose, great record.
Yeah, definitely. And it showed that punk in the UK could be marketed. Okay. I think it got some airplay on the radio.
Yep.
How many copies did it sell? Any idea?
No idea. I mean, like, again, it wasn't a hit. It didn't get anywhere. None of it's incredible, really, because when you look back at records like that and Whole Wide World by Reckless Eric and some of the early ones, Nick Lowe, So It Goes, Ian Dury, Sex and Drugs and Rock and Roll, none of these records made even the slightest dent on, the top 75. Never mind the top 10.
I think that's insane, man. Now you hear those songs like regular, like on radio now, like nothing, like, because they're such a classic.
Yeah, Whole Wide World. I mean, I think that is one of the great iconic records of from the history of Stiff. But at the time, it didn't sell enough to get anywhere near the top 40.
I saw Reckless Eric right before COVID, like in late 2019, at a little like supper club place in the city, and he was opening for the Flaming Groovies. and I had never seen him before, and I was like, wow. And that song, to hear it live, I was like, wow, man, what a great track.
2 chords in that.
Yeah, it's all it is. Barely that. That's all it is. Another guy that has to be mentioned as an important part of the Stiff catalog is Elvis Costello.
Yeah, Costello was great.
I mean, this guy changed music a lot, especially in those years, and it's great because Stiff is really integral in that.
Yeah, I mean, again, one of the things that's so incredible, like how they made him cool. Not only did they kind of launch Costello's career, because he'd been knocking around for a while. He'd been in Flip City, and he'd done some stuff, but he'd really got nowhere at all. He did absolutely nowhere commercially, and they obviously released My Aim Is True. Yeah. His first album, just an incredible record. That was done at Pathway, with basically what became Huey Lewis and the News, Clover.
Oh, Clover, the original, yeah.
Yeah, who were
that was the band Huey Lewis was in before, right?
Yeah.
You know what's the funny thing over Costello? Remember he got kicked out of Saturday Night Live? He played that song and they told him not to come back for many years.
Yeah, that was a couple of years later. He did Radio. He would instead and all
and he
that.
was there for the 50th anniversary. He played that same song that got him kicked off, which was funny.
I know, brilliant. Yeah, that was great. And he had a few moments in the States where he said the wrong thing and got into trouble.
Oh yeah, there was a bit of a racial incident too.
There was.
Yeah,
there was.
He's been walking that back for 45 years now.
Yeah, I know. That was
every once in a while it gets brought up. Yeah, that he said that.
Yeah. I've still got the front cover of Rolling Stone. Elvis Costello repents.
Yes.
From 81, apologizing for that incident. Yeah. But Clover were just basically not kicking their heels. They were in England, and they were just kicking their heels at the time. So they were kind of free. He hadn't got together with the Attractions.
They were American, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
So they just recorded this with him, and actually, that's one of the reasons it's got a kind of country feel in parts. Mm-hmm. My Aim Is True. Partly because of some of the musicians he recorded it with, and so I mean, Costello looked like a kind of supply teacher, in 1976. He looked like the uncoolest guy ever, and the fact that Stiff managed to pick him up, with his kind of like Buddy Holly glasses and his ill-fitting suits, and there's no way in 1976, 77 that guy was going to. You'd think, well, how are you going to market him? The majors would have looked at him and said,
no way.
No. There's no chance. Well, what are we going to do with this? And Stiff kind of made a virtue of the fact that people like Reckless and Ian Dury and Costello didn't look like that they would fit in with the corporates. They were the square pegs of the industry. So, they actually made a virtue of that. They had a great full-page ad in the NME, a picture of Ian Dury looking a bit shambolic, and it just said, "This man is ready for the mincer."
That's kind of brilliant.
It is.
Yeah.
You know, it's almost like when like with the Beatles and the Stones, like the Stones were always considered like dirty and gruffy, and you know, not somebody you want to bring home to your mother, but the Beatles were clean cut, which in reality was not really true, but that's how they marketed it.
Yeah.
I'm curious though, maybe you know the answer to this. You know, in the early days of Costello, he was known as the Angry Young Man. Is that something Stiff came up with, or no?
I think so. His manager was Jake Riviera.
Right.
After, and Jake Riviera on Stiff was like the way that they kind of handled the way that the way he was like his handler basically, and you did not mess with Riviera. He was a really tough character. Right. And his thing was like, don't do interviews. You know, Costello, he's not going to do interviews. He's not going to talk to anybody. They tried to create this kind of mystery around him. You know, don't tell anyone anything about your background and all this. So that was clever stuff. You know, they made a virtue out of that, and that to try to make him interesting, more interesting to people. And he also did this thing, a stunt where he played outside the Hilton Hotel in London, when CBS executives were having their big meetup, big conference.
Right.
So all the suits were in there, and he was outside, and they had people with placards. Stiff sent people with placards down there. You know, Elvis is king and all this sort of stuff, and created a scene. Costello got arrested. He got arrested by the police, and they dragged him off. But that was all deliberate, just to try and stir up some interest around him. You know, kind of guerrilla tactics.
Publicity stunt, basically. It's
and they were really good at this. You know, that they knew that one of the many things that Riviera and Robinson were good at was creating a noise around something.
Yeah,
they're brilliant at that.
Yeah. That definitely had to increase sales and increase increase appearances and the whole look of everything.
Pretty much. Was it Walter Yetnikoff? The guy was I think he was president of CBS at the time, or one of the high ups there. I think pretty much as a result of that little episode, Costello did end up on Columbia CBS.
Yes,
in the States.
Right.
So it kind of worked.
Yeah. Now, I'm just curious. I'm trying to remember in the book. Did they ever put together a tour of all these Stiff artists?
Yeah.
They did, right?
Over the time that Stiff was going, they had 3 tours. The first one was on a bus, and that was Ian Dury, Nick Lowe, Elvis Costello, Reckless Eric, and Larry Wallace. And I think the idea originally was like, well, you know, it's a bit like when the Motown acts came, you know, that kind of Motown review, and you could see that, I don't know, the Supremes and Smokey Robinson and someone else on the same bill. It was kind of it wasn't a new idea, but the way that Stiff did it was pretty different. They just basically packed them on a really old bus, an old coach, and sent them around the country to colleges, basically.
College. Okay.
You know, colleges. It wasn't like pubs and big pubs. It was like college venues. Most of them were unis, and they just bust them around the country. And the idea, I think, originally was, they can all take it in turns. It'll all be lovely, one big happy family, and like Costello can do one night, he can headline one night, and another night Nick can do it. Blah blah. It obviously didn't really end up like that. It ended up in a kind of war between Costello and Dury. But basically, Dury and the Blockheads, I think most people would agree that, you know, if it had been a fight, you know, because Dury and the Blockheads,
would have took care. He would have cleaned house.
They would have won at least on points. You know, you know. So basically, both of them, with Costello and the Attractions, were incendiary. They were just amazing.
Yeah.
But Dury and the Blockheads took their prizes. You know.
Yeah, they're one of these bands that didn't really make it in the States, unfortunately. Costello had a lot more success in the States.
Yeah.
I always go back to the Blockheads as like just such an off. I mean, they're like an offbeat kind of thing, you know, but they have this anger, you know. And it's great.
We got I think, you know, over here you've got, obviously I was talking to somebody about this the other day, very different markets in the States.
Yeah.
The kind of stuff that has been huge in the States maybe not so much here, and then the reverse. So we kind of unusual acts or kind of eccentricities. I mean, a lot of the American acts that have done really well here, Sparks, for example, maybe the B-52s, possibly Devo, those kind of acts have done really well in the UK. I think Sparks have had one hit ever in the States, I think.
And that it wasn't a big one. Yeah, it was
incredible. I mean, I absolutely love them, but they had to almost come here to get going, to get an audience, to start growing an audience.
We've discussed so many bands that, went through that, American bands that went to England to get big. And sometimes it's the other way around, though, too.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of an example. Can you think of the top of my head? But it has happened.
Bands that have had to come to America to be.
A lot of the punch, like the Ramones, when they went to England and down there, they were a lot more popular here in the beginning. They were making more money out there. They were selling more records. Even from the to Blondie, they were doing better in Europe than they were doing here.
I think that's absolutely right, and I think one of the reasons, I suppose, for that is that obviously America is a much bigger country physically. You've got a very different culture in terms of radio. You'll have gospel, country, all this. We certainly in this time in the 70s, we had like the charts. That was it, and everything got poured into that. And so it was easier maybe if you came here like Sparks did, for example, and had this town ain't big enough, you have one really big hit, then you're kind of up and running. You're on your bike, But in the States, it's harder to get that kind of
because you got R&B, you got like a million labels, charts.
It isn't just the charts and the different genres of music. It's also just the geography. Okay? The United States is such a huge country that you can go to England and it's a smaller country, less populated. You can get around the country by car, and through a tour like that. I mean, the United States touring is a gruel.
Oh yeah, I mean, this is one of the reasons why I think that did work quite well, in a sense. The first tour with the bus, because you could cover so much ground. You could go to so many places. There was probably like 30 dates or something on that tour, something like that. And it was great. And after that, a little bit after that, they did another tour, 78, which was but by train.
Oh.
And they literally got a train and liveried it all up. Be Stiff, all down the train. Rachel Sweet, another American act, who was picked up. She was about 16 or 17. Quite an amazing story, really. Her mother had actually passed away not long before she came over to England, and she arrived here still effectively in school. Stiff sort of picked her up, and in a way that would never happen now. Was like, she was put up in some guy's flat or something, and and she's put into a studio with a load of guys, backing her and stuff. And she made an album, Fool Around, and she had that song Baby, Carla Thomas cover.
Yes.
And so she's another example of somebody that we people over here would never have heard of, probably Rachel Sweet, if it hadn't been for Stiff.
Yeah.
But they Robinson had heard about her, and I think they brought her over, and she made a couple of good singles. That was I think one of the only hits that happened as a result of the train tour. But she used to sit on the train doing her homework with a tutor.
Yeah. That would never happen today, that's for sure.
That would not.
No.
I don't think safeguarding issues were a thing then.
No, they weren't thinking on those lines.
But think about,
go ahead, Rob.
I would say, think about how big the United States. There was band in California that I never heard of until like 4 years, and they were popular, and also it was amazing because that's how far, like from west to east, that you wouldn't hear stuff. And there was probably a bunch of stuff from here that the West Coast didn't hear until a few years later. That's why music is such a weird thing, and that's why some people get popular, some people don't.
It might have been easier in the 60s in America because you used to have regional hits.
Yeah.
Okay. And sometimes you would have the same song done by different people be hits in different markets. Like an example in the 60s would have been Van Morrison.
Oh, yeah.
Doing Gloria, and then the Shadows of Night doing Gloria.
Yeah.
And I think they were both hits at the same time in New York and Detroit. Okay.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And in those days you could have that. But by the 70s in America, it was all one thing.
Yeah.
The country was just one thing. The charts were the same everywhere and all that.
But
and it being so big, it being so big, it was hard to conquer. Just off the top of my head, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Rich. I'm sorry. You
all I was going to say was another thing aside from the geography is Ian Dury, for example, was a very idiosyncratic, very English act. The lyrics were very English.
Yes.
And I think they would have that rhyming slang and all that stuff would have been very lost on American audiences.
Oh, that always gets lost on American audiences.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the perfect example is the Kinks.
Oh yeah, the Kinks.
The Kinks, who are one of my favorite bands of all time. I don't think they ever made a bad song. Okay, there was two reasons why they didn't make it as big as they could have. One, they got banned coming to America in the late '60s because Ray Davies got into it with the Musicians Union, which was not a good thing to do. Okay, so they were banned for a while when they were having their biggest hits. They couldn't come back into the early 70s, so they never got that foothold into the States, even though they're one of the greatest of the British invasion. And the other thing is, the reason why they were never so huge is that they were too English. And you listen to these lyrics, and I understand it because I understand the music and the culture, but on the average American, it doesn't fall.
No.
Like Waterloo Sunset, can bring you to tears when you listen to it, but it's just not going to be a big hit in America,
Yeah.
I think Sunday Afternoon is a fantastic song that the Kinks made.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that Stiff really appreciated, was good writing.
Yes.
And at the beginning of the label's history, they really were they had a lot of really good writers, Costello and Nick Lowe and Graham Parker. There was a lot of very, very good writers, but they were in the main quite. It was quite anglicized. It wasn't something that was going to ever travel very far, probably.
Right. It was music for English people. Basically.
It's almost like Motown. Motown had great writers and all Stack Records and other. They had their own writers that would build it within. That's probably the same mentality of Stiff Record. You know what? Let's build it in and take it out there.
Yeah, I mean, Stiff was a kind of, pissed up Motown. I mean, it was a sort of, they had the way they did the records was quite similar. In a little studio, get some session people in, do it, and it was very much kind of, there were a lot of in-house kind of productions and stuff. So there are some similarities, but they really appreciated good writing, and one of the things that Stiff really benefited from was that.
One other thing that would never fly in America too is the motto of if it ain't stiff, it ain't worth a fuck.
Yeah,
that was something. They have buttons made up of that.
Well, I love the fact that when Stiff went to the States and set itself up kind of properly, more formally in America. One of the things. You're asking now. That's probably about maybe 79, 80. Possibly.
Yeah, I was going to say about the 80s. Yeah.
Okay. They had one of the things they did to promote this was had a map of America with an erection, which says America gets stiff. That's. I mean, again, it's classic Stiff marketing. It's grabbing attention. It's making a noise. That's all. They're brilliant at that.
Now, changing gears for a second, I know by the early 80s, things would change economically for the label, and I think they became under the control of Island Records, right?
Yeah, I think really what happened, I suppose, in a nutshell, was that Stiff, although it began trying to just put out the music that they liked, that Dave and Jake liked themselves, and let's just get exciting music out there. Obviously, the bigger the label got, the more mouths it had to feed. It became a bigger machine. You've got bigger premises, you've got more rent to pay, more salaries, and so on. And the need to make money became ever more urgent, really.
Right.
And one of the reasons why Madness, I think, was so important to Stiff was the fact that they, if you look at the catalog numbers, and you'd have Madness have a hit with like Baggy Trousers or something, really big hit, top five, and then Stiff might have put out the next 10 records might have completely flopped, and in a sense, Madness were kind of bankrolling that. There weren't that many, Stiff were running out of writers by then. Costello had gone. Ian Dury by 1980 had gone. So, it didn't have those kind of writers anymore. And Madness was so important to Stiff because they were just literally everything they did just was just gold, chart gold. They didn't every single that came out was a big hit. So that was very, very important for Stiff. But obviously after a time, even that wasn't enough. And yeah, they became part of Ireland. And Dave Robinson ended up kind of splitting his time, I think, partly between running Ireland, but also trying to run Stiff at the same time. It may be that Stiff, that was one of the reasons why Stiff started to falter in the mid 80s, was
Right.
because Robinson wasn't giving his time, obviously 100% to that, and he was doing things like doing the scheduling for Bob Marley's Legend album. That's one of the things that Robinson's claims to fame is that he kind of oversaw that, which is one of the most successful records ever, I think.
It really is. I can't emphasize that enough. I mean, that album is one of the biggest selling albums of all time by anybody.
Yeah.
Okay. And I mean, it's obviously the biggest seller of Bob Marley's catalog.
Yeah.
That album is like anybody that gets into reggae, that's the immediate go-to one, and you start with that. I didn't realize that he was involved with putting that together. That's
I think he kind of did the running order. That he was involved in the running order, the truck, which is obviously very important. That's one other reason why that record was so successful. So Stiff had a very interesting time in the 80s. It got much more poppy. I mean, there were still amazing records that did chart. I mean, Lena Lovitch is someone we should mention because again, we've talked about like the American influence and the American acts on Stiff. One of my favorite acts on Stiff was Lena. She actually Lucky Number. I mean, Bird Song, brilliant record. Say When. Some New Toy wasn't it, but it was great, really, really good record with Thomas Dolby.
Yes.
And she was someone, again, she's from Detroit originally. Ended up over here, went to college, and she was like those other people who came to Stiff. She'd been around for a while, but doing different things, but hadn't really had any major success. And she was on the train tour, the B Stiff train tour in '78. And I mean, again, one of the things I love about Stiff was that there were so many female acts.
Oh yeah.
Jane Eyre, another American, was on Stiff, did a few Yankee Wheels, that single, that was Jane Eyre. Jane Eyre and the Belvederes, and so there was lots of really, really interesting female acts. The Go-Go's had some records on Stiff too. Brilliant band.
Oh yeah, I mean they made it big here, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Kirsty MacColl is another one.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they don't know what an amazing song. Again, another extraordinary writer. And again, it was Stiff really that with Stiff that she came to the fore.
Yeah, and of course when you think of Kirsty MacColl, you think of the Pogues as well, and they were signed to Stiff as well briefly. What was the song that came out on Stiff by the Pogues?
Well, so the first three albums were all on Stiff.
First three were all on Stiff.
Yeah. So Red Roses for Me came out in '84.
That's right.
and then Rum Sodomy and the Lash, and then If I Should Fall from Grace with God. They were all on Stiff, and so Robinson again saw the Pogues in a very small venue, and signed them up straight away. And the Pogues, a lot of these acts, although they were very different, they had one thing in common. A lot of Stiff acts were very visual. And that was something that was very important to Stiff, because video, which wasn't so important in the mid-70s, was very important by the later and 70s and the early 80s. So Madness, when I was at school, kids would get to school the next day, and all anyone would be talking about was, did you see, the Madness video on Top of the Pops?
Yeah.
The guy with the saxophone floating about in midair.
Yep.
And all this stuff. They really knew that the importance of video. Robinson he could really see where it was going, and the Pogues were visual. Madness definitely. And if you think about a lot of the acts that did appear on Stiff, they looked good in a video setting.
Yeah, and it was a time when videos meant a lot. MTV was a couple years old at that point, and still kind of important, and people were realizing the visual was as much important as the record. So you had these bands, and I mean, you look back that maybe period from 81 to 85 or so with MTV. I mean, we've all seen those videos. Everything is classic. We grew up with that stuff. And I mean, I'm thinking of the Pogues, like the video for Waxy's Dargle, when Spider's hitting himself in the head with the beach, right? I mean, you can't get more visual than that,
And also, I think when we talked about Shane, again, Stiff kind of sending up. Not sending up, but sending up the other majors and stuff. Like at the time that, for example, Streams of Whiskey was recorded, the video for that was basically Shane and Jem sitting in their underpants,
right,
in deck chairs, next to an old canal,
right.
Whereas at the same time, Duran were in the charts, like filming a video on a yacht in the Caribbean. So this was kind of sending up what it had all become. Stiff had a sense of humor for sure, and and they loved signing acts that shared that.
Now, when would Stiff hang it up in the '80s? It was like by 87 or so. That would be the end of the label.
Was it?
Yeah. It was pretty much 87 when it kind of folded. So it was going about 11 years, and I think it had a very good run, and it did achieve a huge amount. We had three number one singles, which was terrific. One of them was Hit Me With Your Rhythm Stick, Ian Dury, and there was also It's My Party, Barbara Gaskin and Dave Stewart's a cover, and House of Fun by Madness. He had three number ones. They launched Costello, they launched the Pogues, Madness, first punk record ever.
Yep.
So there was a lot of achievements, huge. And also they kind of they tore up the rule book. I mean, marketing and promotion would never be the same again, really.
Right.
The way that records were seen as artifact, that it wasn't just a record and it's just a means of getting some music out. It was actually, what can we do to make this really exciting for the person who's buying it? Can it be colored vinyl? Can it be a picture sleeve? Mm-hmm. Can we do 3 versions of it and delete them all and get people charging all over the place trying to find them?
Yeah. And they did that in their first 7-8 years of existence before Island took them over or anything like that. So it really showed how an independent label could function in a world of majors. Okay.
Yeah, I mean the majors, to sign a band, they'd have to have numerous meetings, boardroom meetings, and it'd probably go on for months. Whereas Stiff would basically, agree a deal on the back of a beer mat down the pub at lunchtime, and then the following day they'd have him down Pathway recording it.
Now, where are they now, Stiff Records?
So there's nothing happening with Stiff now at all. It's a shame in a sense. There was a time when, in fact, around the time the book came out, it looked like there was going to be some more activity. There were some later records. There was a bit of a revival, but at the moment there's nothing happening really.
Yeah, I mean, in the late 2000s, I think about 2008.
Yeah,
I picked up the box set that
yeah,
came.
that's right.
Okay? One of the greatest box sets I own. Okay, and you know,
I think it's got
I
the
was hoping
plasmatics in it.
I was at the time. I think I had read like in Mojo or something like that they were gonna come back, but it never happened.
Yeah, that just didn't happen. But you know what they have left behind is just an incredible legacy. And one of the things I hope that people who read the book will enjoy is just the sheer the sheer imagination involved, the
Right.
humor. It was pure rock and roll. The stuff that went on behind the scenes. There was a lot of fallouts along the way. But ultimately, they brought to attention people who otherwise may never have got that far. We may never have heard their music. Ian Dury, probably a good example. I think Costello, probably, as you say, that he would have made it maybe anyway, but for sure
Taken longer.
Would have taken longer for sure.
Yeah.
So it's just a brilliant legacy.
Your book, Be Stiff, the Stiff Record Story, was out of print for a while. Okay.
That's right.
Now you've brought it back in a self-publishing kind of way. Can you tell us what you did here?
Yeah. So it's available on Amazon. So I think anybody anywhere can pretty much go onto Amazon, look up Be Stiff, the Stiff Records Story, and buy it. It's on print on demand. So there's no physical stock. It's printed on demand, and people can buy it. People are buying it all over the place, which is really, really great, because I think a lot of people do remember these acts. And Stiff did have, well, like we talked about America and so on, Stiff did have a lot of interest in other European countries and Scandinavia. It wasn't contained just within the UK, but there's a lot of people out there of a certain age for whom this stuff is still very dear to their hearts.
Sure. Now, just so people understand, the self-publishing thing is very common now. Okay, but this print on demand, I was kind of intrigued by it, because it's the way it sounds to me. Maybe you can explain it. Is you don't really need to have all these books printed up. It's when somebody wants it.
Yep.
The company will print it up.
Yeah, and I mean, some of the major publishers, but big publishers, use it, I think, in certain circumstances. In this instance, with the Stiff book, because the publisher ceased to trade, I had the book, but no way of getting it out there. And what's great is, like I say, it's not just available in the UK, because it's done by demand. There are no physical copies on being shelved or warehoused. People just, as soon as it's ordered, that sets in motion the printing of the book, and that can be done anywhere.
And you get a nice, I guess, paperback copy.
Yeah, okay. It's a large paperback. It's a really lovely product. It's a large paperback, so it's not
very well kind of binded together and all.
Yeah, it's a nice book. And like I say, these acts are very dear to a lot of people's hearts. People remember them very fondly, and I hope that people will dig out a copy, and it'll be a nice trip down memory lane.
Yeah. I mean, so many of these bands I grew up listening to. It was hard to, when out in the 80s and stuff, some of this stuff ended up on compilations and things like that.
Yeah.
Nick Lowe obviously went on to make a lot of records, and Costello and stuff like that. Some of the stuff I didn't hear until later on. The Pogues, though, was I always loved. And of course, when I got the box set, if anybody can find this, I don't think it's in print anymore. But the Stiff Records box set, if you could pick it up on eBay, it's worth every dime.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I think it's got the plasmatics on it.
Yeah.
The plasmatic definitely can.
Yeah, the plasmatic.
Your baby. Another American act that one seen, never forgotten.
Oh yeah. I listen. I can tell you, I was at the show in '83 when they blew up the Cadillac on the pier in the west side of Manhattan. Okay. I was not supposed to be there. My mother did not want me going into the city that day. Okay. But I went anyway. And I'll never forget that. And they were talk about visual. Holy shit. Okay. Yeah. But thank you, Richard, for coming on. Richard Ball,
man, that was
his book, Be Stiff, the Stiff Records Story. Go on Amazon, print on demand, and get this book. I can't emphasize it anymore. If anybody out there respects my musical tastes, just don't run out. Get it right now. Definitely.
Well, it's great to see you guys again. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. You're always welcome on the show, Richard. Any upcoming stuff you got going on? Can you tell us? Or
no, and I'm not working on anything else. So there's different foreign language editions of the Shane book, which are kind of going through the motions. So so that's great. That's really, really good. But that's not something obviously that would ever happen with the Stiff book for reasons that we've kind of already talked about.
Yeah.
But yeah, that shows the kind of global appeal, I think, of Shane.
Oh, forget it. Yeah. I think he's bigger now than he's been for years. I mean, there's people talking about him and everything in bars and stuff. And, oh, remember that song? Remember seeing him here, and this and that, So any chance coming to America? I'd love to meet you.
I'd love to. I would absolutely love to. I still think that, maybe some Irish clubs and Irish venues.
I will take you around.
Would like to hear about the book. So leave that one with me.
Definitely. Let me know. You're definitely more than welcome.
That is on my mind. Yeah, for sure. Okay. I'd love to come over.
Okay. And Rob's the bartender. He will take care of both of us.
Yeah. If you ever do come, I can set up like some weird kind of book signing at international. Yeah, we had a couple. We had Billy and we had Cardinaro.
Right. We interview a lot of authors, and we've had book signings at the International Bar in the East Village where Rob bartends. And you might get maybe 100 people or something. Not huge, but something. Definitely.
Yeah. Well, if you can sort it, I'll come.
Okay. All right. Let us know when you want to.
Sure.
We'll figure it out. Great. Yeah. All right, Richard. Thank you so much. And what do we say at the end of every episode, Rob?
We don't get drunk.
We get lumped up.
And we'll see you.
Get lumped up.
All right.